And welcome into the Senior Bowl here in Mobile, Alabama. I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith, and our second year getting to cover this opportunity together. And the cool part about today is getting to see these Georgia guys go head-to-head, getting to see Smael Mondon go against Trevor, Etienne. What's that like?
Well, it is neat. You know, it's been about team for these guys the whole time they were in Athens. Now it's about individual accomplishment, trying to frame yourself as a great pick. And like you said, these guys are still former teammates and friends, so they have a little bit more fun with it as well. So it really is a great event. Chamber of Commerce Day down here today in Mobile at campus of the University of South Alabama. What do you think? Maybe 60 degrees, just enough sun to keep you warm, but cool enough for these guys to really cut loose today.
Well, as the self-proclaimed mayor of Mobile, you've been covering this event for a really long time. What's the benefit of it for these guys?
Oh, it's incredible. It's an on-the-job interview. I mean, so many times you talk about, well, they're going to meet with this team one-on-one or they're going to throw for them privately. But they get to go out here and play football, and not just team drills, but the individual drills. You get to see how willing is Trevor Etienne to step into a block from an oncoming linebacker. About those one-on-one matchups. You know, a lot of times when you're a Georgia player, there's a lot of great players around you. Out here, I mean, the G on the helmet still means something. When the ball snapped, though, it's man-to-man. We're going to find out how good these guys really are that chose to compete. 5 of the 7 guys with invites are down here. Of course, unfortunately, the center, stepped wrong and wasn't able to make the trip. Already rated the #1 center in the country. Tate Ratledge, not so sure why he's not here. That's a guy I thought who really could have benefited from being down here.
Yeah, but the 5 who did show up here in Mobile, of course, that's Trevor Etienne, Arian Smith, Dan Jaxson, Smael Mondon, and Ingram-Dawkins. And just getting to watch their reps today, someone that actually really stood out to me was the wide receiver, Arian Smith, who was working a lot with Riley Leonard. It kind of became this running joke all season long that Arian was going to have those drops. But from what I saw today, a lot of ball security. And even after, when we got the chance to talk to some of the players, Arian was in the corner taking extra reps.
Oh, yeah. Well, we talked with Jim Nagy, the executive director, recently interviewed for the general manager job with the New York Jets, and he said, look, the catches, we can work that out. That's not a big deal at the next level. You get a jugs machine, you get some of these NFL guys around them, coach them up, get the confidence back. The one thing you can't teach, 10-1 speed in the 100 meters. I mean, Arian Smith is on everybody's draft board. Everybody's got a plan to add a guy with world-class speed. And when you meet Arian, you get around the charisma. You know how hard he works. He's willing to block. He's worked on his routes. He's worked very hard to make himself a competent receiver. And he had some struggles this year, but he also had some big plays. I think Arian Smith's in for a big week. I know he wasn't perfect today. Did catch a nice post corner route from Jaxson Dart, though.
Yeah, so tomorrow we'll actually get the chance to see the stats from day one. It's not going to surprise me if we look up there and the speed leader for the American team, which all the dogs are playing on this year. It's going to say Arian Smith.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, Arian's speed is definitely his weapon, but he's also a hard worker. And I think that's another thing that comes out of this, Kaylee. It's not just coming down here and showing your skills. How coachable are you? What is your attitude like? How do you connect with other players? And this time it's the head coaches and the GMs. These guys have been scouted and there's game film, but there's nothing like seeing somebody in person. And maybe not just for the draft. Maybe it's the second contract. Maybe you say, you know what, I remember meeting that kid in Mobile and, he left me with a good vibe. Or I remember he made a couple nice plays and we weren't able to get him. Or he went a little bit earlier than we thought. But you get that face-to-face time. You make that first impression. I think all the Georgia guys fared really well on day one.
Well, you mentioned hard worker and watching, I don't know if there was any harder worker out there today than Smael Mondon. I mean, you want to talk about the most reps of any Georgia player, any opportunity that he had to step out there. He was just like itching to get his reps, and we got the chance to talk to him after. And what are you trying to showcase to these scouts? And he said, I want to show them that I'm healthy.
Yeah, no doubt. Smael's a guy that played injured for about a year and a half. I mean, the old warhorse. He was there for all the big games. He was out for a little while with the injury. Showed up big against Georgia Tech. Showed up big against Texas. Showed up big against Tennessee. Wants to show up big here. Wants to show you he's not going to get fatigued. He doesn't have a problem cutting. He can cover every bit as good as he did when the scouts would come and watch him cover Brock Bowers in practice. So Smael Mondon, a guy who's on the rise, going back up the draft boards. The physical will be big for him in Indianapolis, but he looked great out here today, Kaylee.
We saw him going head-to-head countless times with Trevor Etienne, who you had the chance to speak with. And I think the big question everybody wants answered was, what was that decision to go to the draft instead of staying an extra year? Did you get that answer?
Yeah, it was a business decision for Trevor. He had told his coaches and he told his teammates he was coming back. But upon closer introspection of the NFL draft, the backs that are out there, and what he could accomplish by coming back versus going on. I mean, look, this is a guy who's played 3 years of SEC football, taking a lot of hits. Had that shoulder injury he played through. Still helped Georgia beat Kentucky. I don't think they beat him without Etienne on that drive. Beat Texas twice. I mean, you really put the game on his shoulders twice against Texas. And then he also had the injury late in the year. So, I mean, here's a guy that played through some bad ribs in the SEC title game. If you're Etienne, you've played 3 years of SEC ball. You've got a chance to go and realize your dream in the NFL. How much more are you really going to raise your stock with another year? You can come back and get the degree later, but I think Trevor sees an opportunity to go to the NFL healthy right now and close to the same draft status that he had with another year under his belt.
One of the things that we're going to hear a lot about this week as we talk to these players is what you mentioned, the idea of business decisions.
Yeah.
I believe Trevor Etienne coming here to the Senior Bowl is a business decision for him because maybe didn't have the season that he would have hoped to, struggled with some injury, also missed that first game and didn't have those same stats that he did at Florida. And this is really an opportunity for him to shine and raise his draft stock in the minds of all these scouts out here.
Yeah, no doubt. He wants to show he's a 3-down back. That's why we go back to the pass protection. Look, we know how electric Trevor is. We know what a skilled runner he is. I mean, he's got amazing vision and burst and all those things. But what does he do in pass protection? Because in the NFL, you got to pick up some really great linebackers. You got to be willing to do it. How coachable are you? We already saw him pick up 2 different systems at Florida as well as Georgia. So you know this is a guy with a high football IQ. Obviously, he's got the pedigree. His brother is an NFL player as well. He's got a great attitude. Him and Smael having a lot of fun afterward.
Yeah.
I know you got some video of that when those guys were cutting up. Smael apparently beat him in a rep, and Trevor wasn't real happy. He said he slipped on the drill. It kind of gave Smael a look like, don't be talking about me like that, man. But like you said, they're going to have plenty of opportunities to go each other the rest of this week, catching balls from the likes of Riley Leonard, Jaxson Dart, Jalen, Milroe. A little bit different spin than Carson Beck and Gunnar Stockton. Kaylee.
Yeah, it's funny because you see them go head-to-head, and then after each rep they come back, dap each other up, probably talk a little smack. But somebody else we heard earlier mentioned the idea of a business decision was Ingram-Dawkins,
yeah.
Somebody that was really, really close to coming back. What was that tipping point for him? And he said, ultimately, I just did everything that I wanted to do at the University of Georgia. I got my degree, I discussed it with my parents, and it was a business decision, and we decided it was the best thing for me to go to the next level.
Yeah, and winning that SEC championship, and Ty tells us, hey, winning the SEC championship game tougher than winning a national title. And these dogs can talk like that because they've done both, especially this season when you look at that schedule. But this is a guy, who's got a lot of talent. His star's on the rise right now. Doesn't really have that marquee season behind him. But the NFL people are going to notice that. Now, he comes in a little light at 273. He's a combo guy, play edge, play tackle. He's a guy that someone's going to look at and say, you know what, though, this guy's got a lot of talent. He's got a high upside. He flashes. He needs to be more consistent. He needs to bring his lunch pail to work every day and show these NFL scouts and coaches and GMs that he's willing to work hard.
I think apart from getting to actually watch him on the field today, the highlights when we heard him say that the SEC championship is just as difficult as the national championship, if not more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. When you take a look at the season you got to go through in the SEC, I mean, Ohio State finished 4th in the Big Ten. What would they have done in the SEC when you think about the depth of this league and how good everybody was? I mean, you go out here and you look at this field and you see stars from all the SEC schools that are here. I mean, everybody had talent in the league. The last place team was Mississippi State. They played the dogs within 10 between the hedges and threw for 300 yards. So this was a deep conference. Winning that SEC title this year with the depth of the league, I think that meant a lot to these Georgia Bulldogs. They had to persevere through a lot of adversity. Tough loss at Ole Miss, had to bounce back from that. Tough loss at Alabama, had to bounce back from that. And I think that what those guys accomplished is something that these NFL teams recognize. Kaylee, talking with Jim Nagy, he said everybody understands the brand. You know what you're going to get when you draft a Georgia Bulldog.
Well, I think that's something that we're going to continue to see throughout the week, too, is just the difference in the difficulty of practice that they've been through at Georgia. And someone that I'm curious about is Dan Jaxson, because he's not going to test very well in terms of numbers at the Combine. This is really an opportunity for him to stand out here and actually getting to see him make plays on the field. And that's someone that I believe Jim Nagy's very high on too, right?
Yeah, it's personal for Jim. I mean, we had Jim on the Beat show Monday night with Cody, and he talked about Dan. A lot of the NFL teams aren't big on Dan Jaxson, but Jim sees something in him and says, this guy can play at the next level. I've been at those Georgia scrimmages. I've been at those practices. I've seen Dan Jaxson all over the field. He's got burst. He understands the game. He's a sound tackler. He believes in Dan Jaxson. He believes Dan's going to get drafted and shine this week at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I saw Dan taking reps as the #1 safety. Looks like he's going to get the start on Saturday. Last year when we were here, obviously the darling of the Senior Bowl was Ladd McConkey.
Oh, yeah.
We knew what he was capable of, but everybody else really got to see it for themselves here. Is there a Georgia player this year that can have that Ladd type moment?
Boy, that's tough. Ladd McConkey's pretty electric. He probably should have been.
We're putting him in an unfair category, but even remotely close.
Probably should have been a first-round draft pick. I mean, I'm not sure what Trevor's going to do in the game. Obviously, he's explosive, a little bit tougher out here. The blocking's not quite as congruent as it is in your own program. Smael Mondon's doing some nice thing in drill work. You know, Ingram-Dawkins is a talent. We see him shine. I think it could be Arian Smith.
Really?
I mean, Arian is a deep threat, like you said, running a lot of flies today. This is a guy they're going to try to get open deep. He's got some quarterbacks that can deliver the ball on time. That makes a big difference, right, when you got pass protection and you got the ball where it needs to be, and he's focused and dialed in. And I think this is a great job interview for Arian. So I think he has the potential to have a breakout week.
So let's talk about the quarterbacks for a second, because you look at this roster, again, all the Georgia guys are on the American team. Their quarterback list is stacked. Jaxson Dart, Jalen, Milroe, Riley Leonard, and the kid from Memphis. It almost seems unfair, and it's also a cool opportunity to see the Georgia guys be on a team with the people that they've been taught to hate their entire career.
Right, to compete with. And those quarterbacks are challenged too, because a lot of those guys have only played in shotgun, and they're still getting used to taking snaps. I mean, there was some fumble snaps today. They worked on their footwork at the convention center earlier. You know, it's different when you're handing off after you take a snap under center than just doing it in the shotgun. Mm-hmm. So they've got to get their footwork down. They got to get their timing down. It's going to be a very challenging week for those quarterbacks, as talented as they are. And some of those guys, they're not going to be able to rely on their feet as much. Nobody wants to get hit this time of year right before you get ready for the combine. So they're going to have to show they can throw the ball effectively and throw it on time.
I found it very ironic that out of all the reps taken, I saw the most with Arian and Etienne with Riley Leonard, who just defeated them in the Sugar Bowl. And here they are now having handshakes and talking to each other. It's strange to see.
Well, that's the kind of game football is. You know, everybody kind of pulls together, and, you know, the teams have changed a little bit. Everybody's on the American team now. Everybody's trying to look good and help each other look good. Riley Leonard, one of those guys you talk about, great charisma, fantastic leader. That's another thing that these scouts look for. They want to see which quarterbacks can connect. When you throw them in a room with a bunch of new players, who is the quarterback that can motivate his teammates? You know, that's very important to have charisma, as we know very well. Mm-hmm. You need to be charismatic and positive with your teammates. And so all those quarterbacks, you better believe they're going to be on their best behaviors down here.
All right, so we've got 2 more days worth of practice. Who is your eye going to be on the most? What are you most looking for out of the crop of Georgia guys?
Wow, you know, well, Smael Mondon's a guy that I really like. Smael, I know what he's been through. I've covered him a long time. I was worried about the foot injury. I said, man, I hope this doesn't derail this guy's career. I really like how versatile he is. I like the speed that he plays with. I think he's a tough guy. He's a silent leader. He's a very positive leader. So I'm hoping that Smael, he's wearing that number 32. That's a special number, you know.
Oh, yeah.
He's wearing that number 32. I'm hoping that Smael has a big week. And Dan Jaxson. I mean, like Kirby says, I mean, this is a guy Georgia didn't recruit. He just showed up. He said, I'm playing for you, coach. I mean, when you walk on like that and you fight your way into the starting lineup, and then you make that oil painting play. I don't think anybody's ever going to forget that forced fumble that he had against Georgia Tech. Mm-hmm. I don't know if the Dogs win that game without Dirty Dan Jaxson. And then just the positive force he was in the locker room. I mean, this is a guy that really helped those young teammates and earned the respect of all his teammates. So I'm hoping that Dan has a big week. You know, Jim Nagy's really good at picking these guys out. He was the one that said last year, beginning of the year, when everybody was on Ladd about a couple drops, he said, people are crazy. This guy's special. He was absolutely right about Ladd McConkey. We'll see what happens with Dan Jaxson. I think Dan will have a good week, and you're right. The combine's going to be big for him. Let's not say he can't do it yet, though, Kaylee. Mm-hmm. He's still got a little time for some speed work. Mm-hmm. He might surprise us. So I'm not ready to write off Dan Jaxson yet.
So how much does Jim's word actually mean to the scouts out here?
It means everything. I mean, look, this is a guy that was an NFL scout for 18 years. He's got 4 Super Bowl rings. He was a part of 6 Super Bowl teams. Mike Holmgren, Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick. Those were Jim Nagy's bosses for 18 years. And now he's come down here and run this game. This is the 7th year. And you can see what it's turned into. I mean, this is a very fan-friendly event. If you want something fun, different to do, Mobile's a great city, Mardi Gras city, great seafood. And this event, the access, I mean, Etienne's down there signing autographs, Mondon's signing autographs. I mean, there's a lot of fan interaction where you really get a chance for that FaceTime with the players that's kind of hard to get when you're in the stadium at games.
Yeah, we got the opportunity to see Etienne signing autographs for not just Georgia fans, but Florida fans
too. Yeah, well, you know, and that's Etienne. I mean, he's a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I mean, he's not really a bitter, mean guy. Good leader. I mean, you heard Kirby Smart talk about his leadership. You saw the charisma out there, and you saw how engaging he was with the fans, and they loved him. I mean, there were some jokes made, and he just kind of laughs and smiles. Even Smael Mondon, was cracking on him for beating him in a drill, and you could just tell the way Etienne shrugs it off. I mean, this is a guy that loves football, loves being out here. Really, all these guys do, Kaylee. I don't think you get to this point in football if you don't love the game.
Well, so that's going to wrap up day one of practice here at the Senior Bowl, but of course Mike and I will be here all week, and tomorrow we're going to get an opportunity to actually have one-on-one conversations with these players. What's the one player you're most excited to talk to? What's going to be that hard-hitting question, Mike?
Wow, I've talked to all the Georgia guys, and I'm always excited to talk to them. But I want to talk to Jalen Milroe. That's the guy I want to talk to. Talk about ups and downs, and I'm not thinking that any Georgia fans are going to be crying for Jalen Milroe. But
you better silence your Twitter notifications.
A lot of Alabama fans really turned on that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's fair. I think that's unfortunate. We saw how great he was against Georgia. You got to tip your cap. That first half against Georgia is as good as anybody I've seen play against Georgia. Maybe Joe Burrow would be the only other guy that I would say had a half a ball like that against Georgia. I have a lot of respect for Jalen Milroe. I thought he played really good football against against Georgia. I thought he showed a lot of class, and I think he's got a lot of upside. And I hate to see a guy leave his program with so many fans down on him and saying mean things when I thought Jalen Milroe did a lot for Alabama, especially winning that SEC championship game last year.
Well, as I mentioned, tomorrow we'll have the opportunity to have one-on-one time with each of the Georgia players, so make sure to check out our DawgNation YouTube channel. All of the interviews will be posted from there. Any final thoughts, Mike?
Well, to me, this is a game where you go to school. We're going to talk to the Georgia players about what they're trying to prove down here and what they've done. I like talking to opposing players and saying, hey, how did you do that against Georgia? Or how did Georgia do that against you? I'll never forget talking to the TCU defensive captain a few years ago down here when they lost, was it 65-7? And I warmed him up a little bit. Said, boy, TCU had a great season. Boy, you had a good season. By the way, what the heck happened against Georgia? He said, number 19, we had all these plans for Brock Bowers drawn up, and if he did this, we were going to do that, and they were running all those motions and all those shifts, and we just could not keep up with Brock Bowers. And everybody's saying that was the key, and now we're looking at Brock Bowers' rookie season in the NFL. We're going, wow, he really was the key to that offense. He was the guy nobody could stop. And the TCU linebacker captain, he was the one that told me, hey, that's what went wrong. We had a plan for this guy, and we couldn't execute it. So you never know what you're going to hear from these other players about the team. We'll ask Jaxson Dart. We'll ask Jaxson Dart about the game against Georgia, and we'll ask him what did Ole Miss see that enabled that to happen. I think Georgia was a little worn down, but I'll bet you Jaxson Dart will tell you they had a few plans and were able to do some things. So you can always learn a little bit about your team that you cover from other guys on other teams as they talk about what happened in those games.
Well, that's going to be it for day one of practice here at the Senior Bowl. But in the meantime, don't forget to keep checking out our DawgNation YouTube page for more stuff like this and for interviews with players. And with that, I'm Kaylee Mansell with Mike Griffith. We'll be here all week. Check us out. You guys have a good rest of your night.